seeking to bring the court together. I think he's a model public servant in a time of great division in this country. Justice Bryer has been everything his country could have asked of him.
Happy Saturday and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, January 29th, 2022. Jesus Lord. We are already through with the month of January. And so if you're in the Northeast, you may be snowed in. If you're here in North Carolina like me, we got a little dusting last night. It's still cold outside. But we got a whole bunch to talk about today. I got a special person in, Dr. Nicole McFarlane from Fayetteville State University is here with us today. Val's taking a week off, so we're flying solo this week. Dr. McFarlane, welcome back to the deal.
Hello, Ed. How are you?
Well, you know, I try to be optimistic, Doc, but you know how it is. The clip coming in, leading the show, was the President of the United States talking about Stephen Bryer retiring from the Supreme Court. So that means there's an opening now, right? And one of the things that Joe Biden promised during the campaign was that he would nominate a Black woman to be on the court. But before we talk about that, let's play this clip real quick. This is Biden talking about that promise.
Someone to sit in the Supreme Court, I believe, is one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has. Our process is going to be rigorous. I will select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency. While I've been studying candidates' backgrounds and writings, I've made no decision except one. The person I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first Black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
Okay, so there he is. Joe Biden says, this is what I promised.
Right.
Now, Doc, we talk about it all the time about how Black women are viewed in the United States. As soon as Biden reiterated that he was going to nominate a Black woman, you heard sniping from the right about affirmative action, about how whoever this justice nominated is not going to be as qualified, so on and so forth. Let's talk about the larger issue of how it is that there are plenty of Black women jurists who have way more qualifications than Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch and anybody else that was nominated by Republicans, especially Clarence Thomas. He was not the most qualified person. But as soon as you say something about a Black woman, the assumption is that she's not as qualified.
Well, I think that's just the knee-jerk reaction that people have been indoctrinated into taking on. Unfortunately, Black women have been much maligned in this culture and society. Of course, the notion of misogynoir has been, or misogyny aimed towards specifically a non-Black sort of misogyny, has been rampant from day one, but it's on the rise. It seems that the only work that Black women have been charged with or without pushback has been what Patricia Hill Collins calls like the mammification of the job sector. Where we are in charge of caretakers, and that we are there to comfort people physically or emotionally or mentally. And the minute Black women at any point challenge the status quo or challenge just the general, hegemonic state of being, we are demonized and held to great suspicion. And this is unfortunately true. There seems to be a rise, even among Black men. This seems to be very much a continuing trope. Among Black people themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to get a lot of pushback from like the gender divide within the Black community, unfortunately. But the white supremacist worldview, which is obviously like a term that was invented by the Supreme Court. Like when we use the word white supremacy, people think it's something that Black women came up with or Black people came up with, but it was actually a term developed by American jurisprudence to describe how things are supposed to be. Going back to the Dred Scott case, the idea of white supremacy. Abraham Lincoln even used the words, the supremacy of the white race. Like this was like this is a recurring idea, recurring set of words, that in the lexicon of American jurisprudence. So of course, within that system, that matrix of white supremacy, of course, patriarchy being the dominant paradigm, Black women are at the very bottom of that paradigm. And I'm not surprised by this particular pushback, but I'm also not particularly, I don't want us to expect like magic, right? Like also just because, she's like this, whatever, all the Black women on the short list, all the Black women, there's so many Black women who are amazing, who are beyond capable, beyond prepared. They're not magic, right? Just because they're amazing, they're not magic. And I think that we're gonna have to temper our expectations of what she will be able to accomplish. Being now will be probably something like it's like a 6-3 minority, like
Right.
6-3 majority.
That's not gonna change.
Right. And so if it continues in that thing, it'll stay in that particular, it'll stay there. But also you have to think about this too. Like I don't think anybody who Joe Biden nominates will like be anything but corporate friendly. Like, so, Sotomayor is pretty corporate friendly, that is part of like the job description. And maybe if Stacey Adams' sister becomes a federal judge, or maybe if Alani Guinier in a perfect world would become a judge, on the SCOTUS. But this isn't gonna happen. We're gonna have the same. We're just gonna have the same.
I want to go back to one thing though, the whole thing with men and how they view, and especially Black men, because I have been seeing a lot of sort of backlash against Black women, including from Black men. And this being in the academy, Black women have done pretty well. If you look at who's getting degrees and terminal degrees and also going on for professional certification like attorneys and doctors and whatever else, all the way to certified public accountants, at least with Black folks, women are the ones who are doing it. And so it seems natural to me that the next nominee for the court would be a Black woman, because they are in numbers in those judgeships compared to Black men. I guess my thing being a Black man is, and being in the profession that I'm in my day job, and not seeing a lot of Black men is very worrisome to me. And then also sort of in the larger culture, still Black men sort of running towards sports and entertainment and those kind of things.
I see a lot of Black women. I mean,
I know you don't see a lot, but comparatively speaking, do you see more Black women in roles that would put them, in this kind of spotlight, if you know what I mean? Because I don't see a lot of Black men.
Yes and no. I still know that Black women make up less than 1% of the tenured professoriate in this country, less than 1%. We still make up less than that. And we may seem, I think that when we seem the idea of our representation is just our hyper visibility, right? We're hyper visible in those roles. And so maybe it's not that there's more of us, just that we're more noticed when we are there, right? I think that might be a huge part of it. But also I also want us to like really take a moment to stop and re-examine like what these statistics about Black female education mean. Black women are much more likely to be one of the stories that's coming up, on being higher debt from student loans, they're more likely to attend for-profit colleges. They are more likely to, while receiving degrees in a particular sector of the job force, again, which goes into the caregiver professions. Even when we are in in the professions, we are still expected to be caregivers, it's caretakers. We're still expected to be the ones that, students can come to and cry on our shoulders. We're still expected to be the ones where colleagues can come and cry on our shoulders, and we're supposed to, let them, lay on our bosom and, there, baby, you're gonna be okay. Like that kind of thing. I think that that's really unfortunate. And it's not, as far as the, I don't know. I really want to dig more into this like gender divide and how it's really starting to, this chasm is really starting to be magnified or amplified on internet and social media right now. It's really fascinating. And I don't really, I don't think there's any shortage of Black men or Black women who are qualified any more so than white people who are qualified. Like it's just by the sheer token of the fact that there are so few people who are qualified to do that. It didn't stop Trump from nominating people who weren't fully qualified all over the federal judiciary, up and down the board. Yeah, I think that Black women are just more hyper visible. And I think Black men are also the equal hyper visibility. The thing is that you rarely see us together in these spaces because there's this just one, the pick me or the just one phenomenon where we can only have one at a time.
Well, that's an interesting point. I want to remind the folks who are watching or listening, this is The Deal. That's Dr. Nicole McFarlane. Val Atkinson has the week off. We're talking about initially Joe Biden and his pledge to nominate a Black woman for the Supreme Court. But there's some other issues embedded in that. And among those issues are how Black women in particular are seen at large in society, how Black women are seen by Black men and in general, and a whole bunch of other issues. I do want to get to a point though, because this is the next story that's coming up about education in educational attainment and what is the real nature of that educational attainment, right? Does it really lead to any other thing other than those same caregiver jobs? One of the stories that we heard this week was about student loans. I'm gonna play a clip and then we'll talk about that.
Lawsuits allege that Navient, while promising to help borrowers find the best repayment plan, instead steered struggling customers into costly long-term forbearances, instead of counseling them on the benefits of more affordable income-driven repayment plans. The settlement ends lawsuits with 39 state attorneys general, including Pennsylvania. As a result, Navient will cancel $1.7 billion in student debt. The New York Times reports that Navient says it did not do anything wrong and did not admit fault in the settlement. All of the loans forgiven were in default, with most originating between 2002 and 2010 at Sallie Mae prior to Navient's spinoff. Borrowers who sued the company say that they were often given no options and hounded about payments they could not afford.
Tried my best to make ends meet with my own financial issues going on, and there was just no solution. They were never willing to work with me.
So Doc, believe it or not, when they were loaning money to a whole bunch of Black folks, they were giving them shitty rates. And then when it came to repaying those loans, they would always steer them towards forbearances, which meant that you still weren't getting that much of a break on the student loan. And then a lot of people didn't graduate. And then the ones who graduated were in professions who the cost that they paid for the degree was not commensurate with with the job that they got when they finished. And now they got to pay, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a degree for a $40,000 a year job. You're in the academy. you're at a traditional university, but you have a lot of non-traditional students, people coming back to school or whatever, who and those people who choose those for-profit colleges that you mentioned earlier tend to be older, right? They tend to be minority. Talk to me about
Working mothers, they turn to be single parents.
Yeah, talk to me about those folks and what the difficulty is that we have with trying to educate people on what kind of education is actually valuable. If you know what I mean.
I think it started a long time ago, the fact that we don't have any kind of vocational training or introduction in high school, that they went away, that those programs went away. I remember you used to have things like woodworking courses, used to have, I remember West Charlotte and in Charlotte, North Carolina, used to have like beautician school. You could, cosmetology. So you could get a vocational, vocational training while you were in high school. You had people who went into electrician work. In New York had a robust, I remember, a very robust, it still does to some degree, but it's gone away because of the, taking charter schools of vocational training. My older sisters went to school in Brooklyn, and they attended Clara Barton High School, and they both received CPA licenses while they were still in high school. So they were able to work all the way through college up to the master's degrees. Both of them now. One of them is a college professor at university in, or a college in the Washington, D.C. metro area. And the other one is a very high paid administrative traveling, who's not been in a clinic with a patient in a very long time, by the way. So, which is, that's another crisis that's coming down the pike from healthcare. But at any rate, I think the ball was dropped a long time ago when we stopped with vocational degrees, vocational training or introductions. And the fact that everyone thinks they need to go to a 4-year college, I think, and I'm saying this as a college professor, it shouldn't be the case that everyone should have. There's so many trades where people can become very highly paid, and the training is, but they're not being steered towards it. They're being they're just those jobs are dwindling, and there's a high demand for like machinists and all sorts of like the anything in securities, anything in the green industries. They're just not being supported. That's some of the things that I remember both Biden said that he wanted to do. But Jill, who's Jill? Where's Jill Biden? What happened to her? I mean, first of all, we can ask where's Waldo, we can ask where's Kamala, and we can ask where's Jill, because Jill was supposed to do something with the technical colleges. I believe the community colleges. I haven't heard a single word from her. So that is a huge problem. And as far as that, I mean, if I was, and I would tell students this all the time, if I was like right now, as like a woman of a certain age who was starting all over again, I wouldn't even go near a college campus. I would take my behind straight to the community college, and I would get a training in HVAC, plumbing, or locksmithing. And just because by sheer, on the sheer merit of the fact that I'm a woman, I would probably go very fast in that profession. Yeah. I'd be a minority.
Yeah, I will add to that, Doc, that I would also say, look at some of the STEM education that's available at technical colleges in networking, security. Those are very high paying jobs, no college degree necessary, because the richest people in tech never went to college or never finished college, right? You look at the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, Wozniak, I mean,
no, it's just that's the thing. It's just like people just don't know how to do any things with their hands anymore. They don't know how to make things. They don't know how to grow things. They don't know how to do, and college they kept, even the ones that go to college don't know very much about how to like build paragraphs. Like they
started on that. You know what? I hear some music in the background, Dr. McFarlane. Let's take a break. When we come back, we can pick up on that, and then I want to move on. You mentioned Joe Biden, and I want to talk about some of the things that he's working on, infrastructure, some other stuff. So let's take a break, and we'll be right back after this.
In life, there are things that suck, but we do them anyway. Family photo sessions with matching outfits suck, but we do it anyway. And you know what else really sucks? Getting screened for cancer. But you've got to do it anyway. Screening can save your life from cancer, or even help prevent certain types of cancer. For more information, visit getscreenedforcancer.org.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Dr. Nicole McFarlane in today. Val Atkinson has the day off. Look, when we left, we talked about the Supreme Court and Justice Bryer retiring, and there is going to be a nominee who's going to be a Black woman. But that launched us into a whole other discussion, Dr. McFarlane, about education, because we also talked about bad student loans that a lot of Black folks have gotten. And in one case here, some folks are going to be forgiven their loans because of the bad loans. But that led us to a deeper discussion into education in general, and whether or not people are getting the right kind of education. Let's wrap that discussion up. We were talking off mic about the need for college and what you would do. And before we left for break, the college professor with a PhD said people may not need to go to college. Just explain that, and then we'll wrap that up. But I think you were making a good point.
Well, I think what college is doing is becoming, I think I might have said this before, it's becoming the 13th, 14th, 15th grade, 16th grade. And people are just checking the box off that they think they need to check off. There is less emphasis on like living the life of the mind, and there's much more emphasis on assessment for teachers assessing students, putting students through this particular set of learning outcomes and assessing them, and that has to do with accreditation and stuff. But a lot of times, the coursework does not necessarily lead to the skill sets that are really called for in the profession, or the career field that the student is seeking. It's just, and they come out of college really not as prepared as they would have thought, and they find themselves having to seek more specialized training, and hence, the devaluation of the bachelor's degree becoming becoming equivalent to today's master's degree, and today's PhD degree becoming equivalent to yesterday's master's. And it's just become increasingly, for lack of a better word, dumbed down. It's really become a racket. The rise of the corporate university, the rise of the board of trustees, running the show and determining curriculum rather than faculty, teachers determining curriculum, and then also having to determine that curriculum based on the way the students feel about a thing. It's the absolute tyranny of student evaluations, of teacher evaluations, evaluating teachers. Now, I finally learned how to beat the system. I'm getting pretty consistent, strong. But it is a system you have to beat.
You may not want to give your secret away.
I'm not, I won't. But no, but but the point is, it's like I once heard someone say, it's teacher evaluations. Asking students to evaluate teachers is like asking a shoplifter to do a customer service, survey. Like, of course they're gonna hate it. You cannot ask them, because a lot of times what students have been trained to do, and a lot of times we're finding the more prestigious the colleges and the universities, they think some studies that they're more like cheating is more likely to occur. Some kind of academic dishonesty is more likely to occur because the stakes are so high. I think there's a sense of like trying to like a cheat code that the students believe that there's a cheat code they can get, and that and now because of the expense, the rising costs and the expensive nature of colleges, it really is a brand name. You know, I think that someone with like a D, I mean like a C average at Harvard still has an advantage over someone with straight A's from like North Carolina Central, or a third tier, or a second or third tier, and maybe even first tier HBCU. Unfortunately, I still think that remains to be the case. I don't know. I just think that I think that it's been an incredibly damaging process to have the university become a place that serves customers and sees the community, the campus community, as stakeholders. Like once that language started to infiltrate and penetrate the idea of how universities are governed, then you have situations like Trump acolyte, Trump, buddies, being, or Bush appoint, buddies, or
Well, so
Obama buddies. I don't know. Let's keep it across the board being appointed as chancellors
right. So well,
just because of who they know.
you don't know this rule. We have a new rule this year. If you mention Donald Trump's name, that means I gotta play a clip of Donald Trump somewhere in the
Oh
program.
gosh, I'm sorry, I take it back.
On the way out on this next break, I'll have to play a clip of Donald Trump saying something
About his big brain. Have that one. I have a really big brain.
So, but I have a better one. To stick with education, one last thing. Let's move to down to from the college down to high school and middle school and even elementary school. There's this debate going on now about whether or not critical race theory is being taught to kids in school, so on and so forth. But there's also a new move to ban books again. We've seen things about the bluest eyes and all that other stuff. I got a clip. Let's play it real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
All right, well, let's stay with education and go to the United States now, where there's a decision by a Tennessee school board that's as baffling as it is infuriating.
Yeah, you would think that book banning is a thing of the past in the United States, but it is well and real. As the Tennessean tells us, Mouse, Art Spiegelman's comic books on the Holocaust, they have been banned by a Tennessee school board.
A Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
Exactly. It's excellent. It's worth a read. They have been banned because there are swear words in them. And the move, the famed writer says, is absurd. According to the local paper, the Tennessean, they quote him as saying, quote, "This is not about left versus right. This is about a culture war that's gotten totally out of control," end quote. And the editorial board of the St. Louis Dispatch, well, it agrees. It writes that conservative activists may go all out against cancel culture, but that they're turning to the original cancel culture tool of banning books. The board says that this isn't about protecting children from profanity. They already see plenty of it on their screens, but about, quote, "the right to purge schools of virtually any serious discussion regarding race, gender, or other issues that make conservatives uncomfortable," end quote. Now, for the Philadelphia Inquirer, such moves have gone so far that they are creating what they call gag orders on teachers to not even broach such controversial subjects. The paper says that this is a new McCarthyism in American schools.
Yeah, and
So, Dr. McFarlane, in Tennessee, where the Scopes monkey trial was, by the way, back in the day,
Wow.
irony, you have them trying to ban this book, Mouse, which is a critically acclaimed book
Awesome,
about the
yeah.
Holocaust. Awesome book. It makes it easy to understand. And so, but we can talk about places where they want to ban The Color Purple and The Bluest Eyes and anything written by any Black person, almost, right? That is too fragile. And in the case of Mouse, it's because there's the word goddamn in it, which I'm going to say out loud because it's just words. And then there's one depiction, and this is a graphic novel, so it's a drawing of a naked person, but it's in context of the concentration camp where people.
And it is not, it's a graphic novel, but it's not graphic. It's still very stylized and.
Right. So Doc, talk to me about this move to ban books and then also to try to bring down subjects that aren't even taught in lower grades that are
Yeah,
academic.
people don't.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, critical race theory is something that is generally taught in graduate school and maybe one course in certain back in, like it's not even that widespread. And what they're calling critical race theory now is basically anything that mentions Black people and or racism or slavery, anything that mentions ethnic. I bet you probably couldn't even say much about America and Ellis Island or even the GI Bill today without someone accusing you of talking about critical race theory now. Like you can't even have an honest conversation about the Civil War without someone accusing you of doing critical race theory, because what they're calling critical race theory is basically anything that makes like really, really narrow-minded suburban and rural Republican white people uncomfortable, or just have to think about or reflect anything about their privilege, or anything that makes them reflect on their privilege at all. And even if that privilege is just a lesson about history. As far as Mouse, that was such that graphic novel really raised the literary standing, right, of graphic novels. And I think the Pulitzer Prize created a category for graphic novels in literature just because of that book. And since then, it's been a proliferation of wonderful books. The Bluest Eye, it starts with like, dear God. Like that's the first words. Like, so what's wrong with, like, that starts with that. And because it has sexual content. And notice they're not trying to ban Huckleberry Finn. They're not banning that. They're not banning Mark Twain. Isn't that interesting? Which is, they're not banning Herman Melville. Moby Dick. There's like so many books that actually are very racially, that have racial sub-themes. They're not banning Heart of Darkness. They're not, by Joseph Conrad. They're not banning these books that are incredibly racially charged because of the particular writers of these books. Let's be very clear. In The Bluest Eye, that is a beautiful, beautiful, but also poignant and heartbreaking story. And it's Toni Morrison's first book and for her first novel. And the fact that that would be banned just shows that they don't want people to be critical of any issues having to do with the psychic and social cost of bearing the brunt of racist, misogynist worldviews. They just want us to shut up. Yeah. And they want to, and the fact that they would even go so far as to burning books. Yeah. It's like that is, well, they don't even care how it looks. They don't care.
I have said
they don't read books anyway. So why would
they don't read?
And that's why they don't value books. It's like they don't read books. So if I can't have them, then why should you? I guess, I don't know. It's like, there's this very sad, there's so many, in fact, a lot of the banned books are the most important books that have been on ban lists, are some of the most important books that have ever been written. Because that's what books are supposed to do.
That's what they're supposed to challenge you to think.
Fiction is supposed to take you places where you would not ordinarily go. Right, fiction is not supposed to just
yeah, exactly. We could talk about this forever. I do need to change gears real quick before we come up to the next break. And I want to talk to you about Joe Biden and his performance so far. I know it's a big jump, but one thing happened, and it just happened, a bridge collapsed. let's take a look at that clip and then we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about Joe Biden's performance up to this point.
And taking a look at the damage, standing a bit away from the edge there, getting a glimpse for himself of what took place this morning and what happens when a bridge is in poor shape and collapses. I mean, this is not something that we see every day, not something the president sees every day. On a day that he was coming to Pittsburgh anyways to talk about infrastructure and providing funding to make necessary repairs to get things in better shape across the country. We are seeing John Fetterman, Lieutenant Governor, right now shaking hands with the president and all being briefed about the situation this morning.
So, Dr. McFarlane, Joe Biden was scheduled to go to Pittsburgh, and lo and behold, a bridge that's scheduled to be redone with the infrastructure money collapsed. The first thing I saw with Republicans were they're somehow accusing Joe Biden of being responsible for the bridge collapse, but that's neither here nor there. The fact is that,
I mean, that's so predictable that
that we knew that was going to happen. But the larger part is that the infrastructure money did pass, where the Build Back Better money didn't for the other stuff like pre-K and all that other stuff. So there is money available to repair bridges and all that kind of thing. So if you give Joe Biden a grade on anything, you know, here's a prime example of some program that he pushed that does have an effect, because people could have gotten killed on that bridge. So now they're going to have a bridge, and a lot of places going to have bridges and roads and airports and all that. So from that standpoint, it makes sense because the country needs infrastructure. However, he is still getting a lot of heat because inflation it has gone up, despite the fact that jobs are plentiful, despite the fact that wages have gone up, despite the fact that there's more money in the economy at large. Give me your grade real quick of what you think the Biden administration has been able to do, even with all the other things going on, still COVID and all that other stuff.
Okay, so I would say maybe like a B minus, and maybe even hinging on the C plus. And the reason is not because he hasn't been able to accomplish anything, but he hasn't been able to take ownership of anything he has been able to accomplish. Everything that Biden has, the things that he has been able to accomplish, there's been a real failure of messaging in terms of what the Biden administration has been able to say. We have done this. Every single time they do something, they seem like to want to have to share it with the Republicans who don't care. They want to always like tout it as being bipartisan. I think that he just needs to stop playing nice. And I think if he played a little, more cutthroat, I think he would have a stronger grade. I think he would be able. I think people would be able to identify his, whatever accomplishments he's been able to bring about. Well, but right now, even if he does accomplish something, we can't see him or recognize him because he's so happy to somehow bipartisanship and share its success with, like, I don't know, the Republicans that don't exist, that don't support him, that are basically trying to do everything to obstruct him, and the couple of Democrats who are basically fighting him tooth and nail on everything. It's not looking good for the midterms. I mean, midterm elections, and it's definitely not looking good for.
Well, the Joe Biden I like is the one the other day who said that's a stupid son of a bitch.
Well, yeah, of course he is, but it's still perception. And like you said, most people are stupid.
Well,
most people are pretty stupid. And so he is saying,
Yeah.
he was just simply saying what. Remember before that question though about inflation being a problem, someone asked him, why is it that 88%? I think it was like something like 80% of Americans felt that he was not competent.
Yeah.
80? Well, the reason is because we just saw him come out. It's like he's been in the basement the whole time. And it's like he's finally come out. It's like no one has seen him. He has not been able to take ownership or claim anything. And so perception is everything, even with students. Like, it's like if the student, for instance, if you're doing grading, and I know this, like you have like names in front of you, just names, and you're looking at all things being equal, and you don't know the student's name and that student's, energy, that student's performance, that student's attitude doesn't come to mind, and you see those numbers, and it's really just between like a matter of rounding up or rounding down for that student in terms of a letter grade. You're going to round down if you can't identify the student in a positive way, right? If you can round them up, and this is just psychology and how people grade. You're going to round up if you can recognize the student, like, okay, well, that student definitely. You can see other mitigating factors that really kind of raises your esteem for them in some other regard. But we haven't seen Joe Biden, except it's.
Yeah, I hear you. You know what? We're going to have to take a break.
Yeah.
So we're running up on a break. So let's take a break. When we come back, we got to finish up with a couple of things. We want to talk about policing. There's 2 police stories I want to talk about. One, in New York City, 2 officers killed this week, but also the trial going on for the police officers who were involved in the George Floyd case, and we want to end up with COVID. So stay right there. And because you said Donald Trump on the way out, I'm gonna play a clip of about the fake electors in multiple states who tried to help Donald Trump win the election. So we'll be right back after this message.
2 Arizona women under heat from the January 6th Special Committee after the group investigating the U.S. Capitol riot subpoenaed more than a dozen more individuals. The panel demanding information and testimony from 14 people for submitting false electoral college certificates in several states, including Arizona.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
An 11-month-old baby was shot just a few days ago. 5 officers were shot in this city. The unification of fighting this battle goes beyond the debate and rhetoric. It is time for us to save our city. And we are going to need everyone on the same page to accomplish this task. And let me be clear, there are no gun manufacturers in New York City. That's right. We don't make guns here. How are we removing thousands of guns off the street and they still find their way into New York City?
And welcome back to our final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That is Dr. Nicole McFarlane from Fayetteville State University, who's kind enough to be in with us today. Val Atkinson is off this week. We are trying to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We started off talking about Stephen Bryer retiring and the likelihood of a black female justice to replace the Judge Bryer, but we talked about a lot of other stuff too, student loans, collapse of bridge in Pittsburgh, and on the way out, we saw a story about fake electors in Arizona, among other states, where one Donald Trump was still trying to steal the election. There's still a lot to be said about that. I won't waste any of our time in this last segment on it today. Maybe we'll pick that up again next week. But in the meantime, coming back in from the break, we saw Eric Adams, who is the mayor of New York City. He's a brother, but he was also a police officer. And in the clip, you saw him talking about 2 police officers being killed. They were on a domestic disturbance call. And as you can see, the person immediately to his right is from the Police Benevolence Association, which to me is a mob organization that forces cities to make rules that allow police officers to get away with killing people. But that's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that. So Dr. McFarlane, so I'll quit talking and let you talk some. When you see Eric Adams standing there talking about violence in New York City and how he's going to go about it, we also see a lot of Black police officers and Black police chiefs in large cities that are having to deal with violent crime. But Eric Adams was a police officer. Now he's the mayor. And there's a sister who's the head of the police in New York. And they're talking about resurrecting units that used to harass Black folks and led to the death of innocent Black folks. Let's talk about first the larger issue of this perceived crime spree in large cities and how there was all this talk about defunding the police and reforming the police and all that. And now we're back to the police need more money. Talk to me about what you see in Eric Adams, but also around the country as it relates to how Black folks who are running these cities and these police departments are going to deal with crime.
They will do what New York did, and they will opt out. They will opt into some symbolic politics or political symbolism in order to they'll just get a brown face in a blue uniform, and they'll just do what they kept doing. Like, am I awful for that? I mean, I just think that's I mean, just to see the idea of in that clip, to see the mayor of New York City, a political civilian office, being wearing a police uniform, that's pretty startling. That's like seeing, I mean, that would have been like Donald Trump showing up in, I did it again, I'm sorry, I apologize, or Biden, or any of the presidents showing up in a military uniform, right? That's scary. That's not okay. That's not cool. But the fact that after what New York has been through with COVID, the lockdown, the severe lockdown, with the impositions of COVID, and then the pushback with the anti-police violence demonstrations a couple summers ago, what you're finding is that New Yorkers want their old New York back. They're you know, the owners, the people who have lived in New York, they want to go back to their sort of yeah, they want to go back to the days where you know, certain people just did not go to certain neighborhoods, and they keep people,
and the police ran shit, right?
The police ran shit, like going back to the Giuliani days almost, you know, like stop and frisk, finding Black people for just like dropping gum foil on the ground for littering, arresting you for allegedly urinating in public when you have, you know, all these things. I think that's going to come back. But the thing is that is what New Yorkers really wanted to have, because of the rise in violent crime due to people not having the resources they need, I guess, for day in and day out living, and for the displacement of all sorts of people from their usual dwellings. There was a rise in crime, and that the only reaction we have to that is not to alleviate lifestyle. I mean, alleviate conditions of people's lives, make it easier for them, to make it easier to get food, shelter, and clothing, but rather than just to go punitive. I think that is just the way Americans want to do things.
Yeah, I agree with you. The flip side of that, though, is in Minneapolis, there's a trial going on. This is the part due of the George Floyd case. I had a occasion to talk to Roger Floyd this week, George Floyd's uncle. He was here in my office, and we were talking about some events coming up that I'll be able to tell you some more about a little bit later on. But he came here to do an interview with some TV stations from around the country who wanted to know the family's reaction to the trial that's going on. Let me play a clip about what's going on in Minneapolis, and then we'll talk about it.
It is day 2 in the federal trial of the 3 now former Minneapolis police officers who were there when Derek Chauvin pinned George Floyd by the neck until he died. 2, Thomas Lane and J. Alexander King, are all charged with depriving Floyd of his civil rights when they allegedly failed to offer medical aid. Tu and King also accused of failing to intervene when Chauvin jammed his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. Lane can be heard on video of the incident asking if they should stop and check on Floyd. In opening arguments, prosecutors telling jurors that the trio had a duty as sworn officers to interject when they witnessed Chauvin's excessive force, but defense attorneys are arguing that officers weren't properly trained.
This particular case is absolutely going to shape the culture of policing. It's going to send a very clear message about the way we expect law enforcement officers to act, even if it's one of their own that is doing the wrongdoing.
So we're in the middle of a trial of the 3 other officers that were there on scene with Derek Chauvin, who did not do anything, Dr. McFarlane, and essentially they're being charged with neglect and allowing Chauvin to murder George Floyd because he's been convicted of murder. So we can say murder confidently now, right? We don't have to say alleged and all the other bullshit that we normally have to go through. So these officers are right now on trial, having to answer to these charges. Here's the flip side to what we were just talking about in New York. Cops still kill Black folk, and generally they get away with it. Right. And those people were out in the street protesting police killing Black folks and not being held accountable. These folks will probably be held accountable because you have a murder conviction already of Derek Chauvin. So it's going to be hard to say, you know, they didn't do it, you know, they're not culpable in some kind of way. So here's a long way to the question. Have we finish that whole discussion that George Floyd's murder brought up about what do you do about policing? Or are we going to just be reflexive and go back like it seems like they're doing in New York to the way we had done it before?
I think they're going to go back to what they know. I think what they also found that like a lot of funding actually increased a lot of police departments. It wasn't, police departments were not defunded. They actually got increased in funding. America's going to go back to what they know, and that's violence and punitive, anti-Black laws.
Yeah, well, there you go.
And criminalizing of Black
criminalizing Black people. Yeah,
that's
yeah. That whole,
and they'll use, but the thing is, they've gotten smart about it, and they know that they can use the symbolic politicians who are descriptively Black, but in terms of their substantive policies and agenda, are not primarily concerned with the rights and the freedoms and the dignity of Black Americans in this country.
Well, that is a good segue to another symbolically Black person that I want to show you. He is the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. And he's in a hearing because he's been serving in the job temporarily. He belongs to this group, some physicians group that we saw during the beginning of COVID who were promoting hydroxychloroquine. And one of the other physicians in this group that he belongs to, I don't know if you remember, Dr. McFarlane, said that the problem with some women is that they had demons in their womb, that demons were having sex with them in the middle of the night. Well, this doctor is part of that same group. So let's take a look at that clip and then we'll talk about it when we get back.
Why are we not reporting on our dashboard, the Department of Health? Why have we stopped reporting COVID numbers on the dashboard?
You're recognized. Thank you, Senator. Our approach to reporting has been to report in a manner and at a frequency and at a level of detail that informs public health, informs the public, and also allows us to
the dashboard, Dr. Lagapo, the dashboard. Why have we stopped posting the dashboard on the Department of Health site?
Again, so my answer to that is that the goal of our reporting has been to inform the public, but also to obtain enough data so that we can we can follow through with our missions in the Department of Health, and that's informed our strategy.
Quite frankly, we have an extreme amount of respect for this process, you, Mr. Chair, and the Senate. However, we don't feel that we're getting any answers met, and we know that there is a long agenda today with a lot of bills. And so the Florida Senate Democrats are in this committee now are going to abstain, walk out, and come back when we have more business to attend to.
So the Democrats in Florida walked out of a hearing when they were trying to ask the good doctor here whether or not he thought that vaccines worked against COVID, and also why they had taken down all the COVID statistics on the Florida website. As I said, Dr. McFarlane, this particular doctor belongs to a group that were promoting hydroxychloroquine, but they also had a doctor in the group who said that women needed to protect their lady bits during the night because demons would rape them, and somehow had spawned COVID. I don't know if you have anything in particular to say about this doctor, but I think what it says to me is that we can't make generalizations about Black folks, right? Because Ben Carson was in the Trump administration, and he's a doctor. Supposedly he's a learned man, and he came across as an idiot.
Medicine is more art than science.
Yeah, but talk to me about this. Yeah, how do you frame this particular fellow who gets up there and comes across like that?
I mean, well, not for nothing. I think without risk of sounding, like a nativist at all, but there's something to be said for the religiosity of Nigeria in terms of the pro-Christian reaction to their experiences with witchcraft, right? And he's of a Nigerian background. That I'm sure there's plenty of Nigerian doctors.
Always the female doctor. I know.
Anyway, because the woman who believed that women were being
also Nigerian,
that succubus, and right, and but also but Ben Carson's not from Nigeria, so like that's. But at the same time, medicine, maybe that has something to do with his experiences as a person with bona fide cultural experiences combating witchcraft. I don't know. So maybe like his belief system has been colored by that, if you will. But like doctors, physicians, MDs do not. They're not necessarily. They use the technologies made available through scientific method, but they're not necessarily scientists. They're more artists, right? So it's like, that's why it's called the medical arts, because there's a lot of room to color, to make decisions, and to play with the lines of that, and to determine your own. And then also because humanity, they're dealing with humanity, and humanity is so weird, and our borders are so permeable and so fuzzy. They can easily, and blurry, it's, you're dealing with a very imprecise subject, right? When they're dealing with people. So I'm just dismayed. I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, he was Harvard trained, but that doesn't mean that he cannot be a completely ideologized zealot. I don't know. I just don't have. I could be floored by it, but if we had not been exposed to the woman in that he's, that woman who believes that succubuses and I don't know.
Yeah, just protect your lady bits. That's all I got to tell you. Because she's concerned about it, you need to be concerned about it.
But there's a placebo effect, right? But there's still studies, right? There's placebo incidents. I think Harvard I don't know if it's Johns Hopkins or Harvard University has a study for the placebo effect. So like, there's still a lot of room for a lot of metaphysical applications in how medicine is being practiced today.
Well, let's leave it at that, because I got one more story I want to talk about. It is COVID related too. There's this fellow who needs a heart transplant. He's in Boston. He's in the hospital and he was on the heart transplant list, but he refuses to get vaccinated. So they took him off the list. Let's look at the story and then we'll talk.
They say at least for now, he will not be getting the transplant he needs.
Our son is in the middle of open heart surgery.
DJ Ferguson's family says he's in desperate need of a heart transplant at Brigham and Women's, but that his COVID vaccination status is standing in the way. DJ's parents say the 31-year-old father of two opted not to get vaccinated because of concerns over rare side effects.
He's had intermittent heart issues, so that's why he's always informed himself against vaccines. He also knew that traditionally vaccines took years to be approved.
He's worrying about the risks of vaccination. I keep thinking, you're going to one of the most risky operations that are out there.
Medical ethicist Dr. Art Kaplan says donor hearts are rare, and transplant surgeons consider many factors because anti-rejection drugs suppress the immune system.
It isn't just, I don't want to vaccinate. You're smoking, you're drinking, you're abusing drugs. You're not flying to the head of the list, and many places would just say, no, we've got other people who are likely to do better.
In a statement, the hospital says, given the shortage of available organs, we do everything we can to ensure that a patient who receives a transplanted organ has the greatest chance of survival. Tonight, as DJ's parents wait on news from their son's latest surgery, they say reaction to his decision has made the ordeal even more painful.
So, Dr. McFarlane, so the argument that the hospital makes and other physicians make is like, well, you're not going to damage your current heart by getting the vaccine. If you have to get it, you're going to actually protect yourself because you'll boost your immune system after you get the new heart. And as a consequence, your chances of survival go up because it's a crapshoot with the transplant in the first place, right? That the whole notion that you're taking a body part from another person and putting it in your body,
and you have to take all kinds of
all kind of immune. Yeah. So talk to me about this fellow and his.
Well, he should be happy to go off the list if he's so afraid of being if you're gonna, whatever his reasons, they're not. There's no coherence. There's something very incoherent about the position. If he's concerned about the experimental nature of the vaccine, then he should be concerned about the experimental nature of the transplant. If he's concerned about, there's some people who are concerned about chip implantation. I can't think of a better way to implant a chip than to put it in your heart, if that's what they're going to do. If you're concerned about what other reasons might people have, it's just why would you? It seems like if that's. But at the same time, I would say this, it would be interesting to see what would happen. They should just not give him any of those, any kind of, don't give him a flu vaccine. Are they going to give him a flu vaccine? I'd be curious to know. I'd be wondering if they would give him a hepatitis vaccine, like the routine vaccines that normally go this time of year. I wonder how many vaccines and inoculations he would have to have and what kind of immunosuppressing immune system boosting medicines or medical procedures he would have to be subjected to. Don't give him any and see what happens. Let him be a guinea pig then. Okay, fine. I don't know, but at the same time, I don't think he should be allowed to put people who are willing to comply with all the doctors, all the doctors who would like to get that procedure, that transplant done. I don't think that he shouldn't be allowed to do that because it's not a coherent argument. This doesn't make sense. Why would he want to get a heart, which is experimental, but not want to get a vaccine that is experimental?
Yeah.
Why would he? And the other reason, if it's a rejection because of New World Order, some crazy stuff I keep hearing people talking about, and some sort of chip they're putting it. It seems like the easiest way to track someone is by putting a heart. Like, so why would he want to have anything to do with it? Why don't he just let nature do its course and just go, say bye-bye?
Well,
Just do it.
you know what?
It doesn't make sense.
I know. I've heard all kind of arguments, Dr.
There's so
McFarlane,
many weird conversations.
yeah, that go on around COVID, and if you decide, and I'm in your camp on this, if you decide that you don't want it, don't get it. But if that takes you off the list, that's the choice you make.
That's the choice you make. Like, but
You make, and you can, and I don't like the notion that you can jump line over, like you said, everybody else who's complied. And I've been vaccinated. I've had the booster. I had a little bit of redness in my arm. Anything you can take. Some people can't tolerate aspirin. Some people can't tolerate,
yeah, and there's real reasons. There's some reasons why some people have not, they've been advised. I know people who have been advised not to take it for whatever reason. They had a particular, it might be because they had a recent COVID infection, and some people because they have certain other types of problems. But it's not very many people who have not been advised to take it. But most people who are not taking it are dogmatically attached to a series of conspiracies or junk science that is discounting the effectiveness of
and they're also 20 times more likely to die. We're about to run out of time. So, like I always do, you got to tell me something good for next week, or something you're working on, or whatever. What do we got to look forward to in the next week?
I am looking forward to seeing how seeing if Justice Bryer, if his Sue gets nominated. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, and like we talked about earlier in the show, there's so many good candidates, that are better than any of the ones that Donald Trump nominated. I mean,
Also, I'm looking forward to seeing some eventually. I don't know if they're coming through with it, but I would love to see some of these Proud Boys, more of these. They found that I'd like to see some of these white collar and professional and business owners who were involved in the January 6th insurrection. I would love to see them be brought up on charges that are more serious, relating to their violence against, if we care so much about law enforcement,
right,
of attacking law
supposedly care about law enforcement. Because you said Donald Trump's name earlier, that's why we had to play the clip earlier about the fake election.
and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to Rudy Giuliani, how this case, his charges.
That will maybe help bring him to some justice. You know what?
And it might bring some other people to justice too. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I hear some music, so that means we gotta go. So what I need for you to do is go out and do something good for somebody today, but also tell people about the show, tell people about the website, thedealwithedclark.com, where you can find me out there writing. I'm still trying to get Dr. McFarlane to start writing for the website. I'm going to convince her about it at some point. But come back next week. We're going to talk about a whole bunch more. And in the meantime, have a good Saturday. All right, bye.